In this video, we're going to be putting together a small form factor gaming PC. And with this one, I'm shooting for 1440p, but if you wanted to save some cash, you could shoot for 1080. I'm going to leave links in the description to a few alternative parts. And in the end, I mean, it's really up to you. Going for a 1080p machine in this form factor is going to cost you a lot less. But again, I wanted to go for 1440 with this. And I wanted to keep it as small as possible. So throughout the build, I will go over all the parts used. I'm also going to leave links in the description. But before we get into it here, I do want to mention that this video is sponsored by URCD Keys. I've been using this site for quite some time now. They offer Steam keys, Uplay, Ubisoft, but the main thing I pick up over here are Windows 11 Pro keys. And right now, if you use code ETA, you can get 25% off. So at checkout, we'll just enter the code ETA. That's going to bring the price down to $22.88. They're going to email you that key, and then you can activate Windows. Speaking of that, let's head over to a new PC that I recently built. As you can see, we're running Windows 11, and from Settings, we're going to go to Activation Settings. It's going to tell us that we're not active. We don't have a key installed, so we're just going to paste it right in here, choose Next. It's going to activate Windows for us, and we're ready to go. If you're in need of cheap Windows keys, I'll leave a link in the description, and remember, you can use code ETA for 25% off. Starting out here with the motherboard, CPU, and cooler. For this build, I'm going to be using the new Miniform BD790i X3D. These have become some of my favorite boards to use while building because it's an all-in-one mini ITX board with our cooler and CPU built in. And of course, since we've got their new X3D model, we've got an X3D CPU, 16 cores, 32 threads. It's actually the AMD Ryzen 7945H X3D. With this, we will need to add our own RAM and storage, and I'm going to be adding 32 gigs of DDR5 at 5600. These boards only support SODIMM RAM, and in the past, it was kind of limited to 5200, but with the new X3D version, we can go up to 56 in this unit. When it comes to storage, I'm going to be going with the 2TB M.2 SSD. We've got two slots here, and we can actually do up to 8 terabytes, so 4 terabytes each on these drives. They are PCIe 4.0 slots. And with the new BD790i X3D, we've got Wi-Fi and Bluetooth built in. Another thing we'll need to add here is a cooling fan. Now, while this does come with the cooler built in, we need a fan for it. I'm just using this 120mm ID cooling fan that I had laying around. The board does come with the mounting bracket, all the hardware we need to get this mounted up. And I didn't want to go with an RGB fan, but you totally could if you wanted to. I wanted to alleviate as much RGB as possible with this setup. As for the case, this has become one of my favorites. These are around $40 over on Amazon, and while it's not the smallest case on the market, it does support mini ITX or micro ATX. Plus, we've got enough room in here for a much larger GPU, but you will need a smaller SFX power supply. Luckily, a company known as Apeva does sell some pretty decent power supplies over on Amazon for pretty cheap. I'm going with their 600 watt power supply here. But if you're going with the lower end setup, you could always go with their 500 watt, which is about $40. But this case does have plenty of room for a nice little mini ITX build with a decent GPU, and that's the big reason I like going with this. That way we are not limited to a low profile single slot card. We can go with something a bit bigger. So I've got the motherboard installed, power supply ready to go, everything's wired up. It's actually a pretty clean build. Now we need to talk about GPUs, and there's a bunch of different GPUs that we could use for something like this. You could go with an older RX 590. Now you're still limited to 1080, and with some newer games, you have to drop some of those settings down. Another good option would be something like an RTX 3060 Ti or a 4060 Ti. But like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, I wanted to run my games at 1440. So I'm going to be going with an RTX 4070 non-TI variant. This only requires one 8-pin power connector, and we're using that 600 watt power supply. Since we've got the non-TI variant, the regular 4070, this only draws up to close to 200 watts. I mean, we really won't even hit that. Around 185 maximum total board power here. And this is going to offer plenty of performance for what I need. And paired up with that Ryzen 7945HX3D, I think this is going to make a killer 1440p machine. Once it's all finished, it looks a little something like this, and it's pretty clean. I could actually zip tie the cables up a little more if I wanted to, up in the front of the case. But overall, I think it turned out really nicely. And this case will accommodate a larger GPU, or at least a longer GPU. So if you can't get your hands on one of these smaller 4070s or a smaller 4060, you could go with something like a 3-fan design. I've seen a lot of them posted up on eBay. But with all of this together, it's time to boot it up and then I want to get into some testing. As much as I wanted to alleviate any kind of LEDs internally or RGB, this card does have some RGB on the side. We've got that Zotac symbol, not bad, and once the side panel's on, we're not going to notice any kind of light bleed through or anything like that. I'm going to be running Windows 11 Pro here. I do need to get all of my drivers updated, but the first thing I wanted to take a look at were some benchmarks. And the first one we have here is Geekbench 6, and with that 7945 HX3D, we got a single core of 2,870, multi 16,733. And yeah, this is a mobile chip, and it will keep up with this RTX 4070 for sure. Checking out 3D Mark with Steel Nomad, we got a total score of 3,770. And the final one I ran here was Time Spy with a pretty impressive score of 16,812. Graphics score, 17,503, and I didn't do any overclocking. There's still some power management we could do with the GPU if you want to get a little more out of it. And our CPU score is right up there at 13,739. Synthetics here look great through all of the tests that I've run, but now it's time to get into some real-world gaming to see what this thing can really do. And the first one we have here is Cyberpunk 2077. 1440p, ultra settings, DLSS set to balanced. We're not using frame gen. We could, since we've got that RTX 4070. It's not multi-frame gen, but it would help out. Still, I didn't want to use it here, and we're getting an average of around 92 FPS, even in this market area, which is a harder area to run in this game. And if you take a look at Afterburner, I've got the TDP listed for the CPU. This does up to 100 watts right out of the box. There is some tweaking we can do from the BIOS. 16 cores, 32 threads, and across the board, we're anywhere from 5 to 5.1 gigahertz with this. And in some cases, I've seen the GPU power go up to around 196, so we're under 200 watts on that RTX 4070. This is one that I really wanted to test out. We've got Oblivion Remastered. I've been running this a lot on iGPUs and just kind of wanted to see how it would perform on a real dedicated GPU. 1440 Ultra DLSS set to balanced, and I figured we'd get a little more out of it with this RTX 4070. It's not a TI or a super variant. Either way, we're over 60, seeing an average of around 69 FPS with this game, but we can get more out of this by enabling DLSS frame generation. And again, I've been testing this a lot on iGPUs. With some of the lower end ones, we do need frame gen, so we'd be using FSR frame gen over there. Unfortunately, there's a lot of ghosting with that, and with DLSS frame gen on the 4070, I'm not noticing any of it, at least to the naked eye. Looks like we're seeing an average of around 109 FPS here, and this is with DLSS off just using frame gen, so we're at a native 1440p, generating some of those fake frames. The next game we have here is Spider-Man 2, 1440, very high, DLSS set to quality. I'm not using any kind of ray tracing right now or frame generation. This game just runs really well on this little machine. By the end of this run, I had an average of 103 FPS. I also wanted to test out Black Myth Wukong, so I just used the built-in benchmark. 1440, very high, and with this we do need some DLSS. We're set to 69%, no frame generation. We got an average of 73 FPS. I also ran the built-in benchmark for Shadow of the Tomb Raider. 1440, very high, 158 FPS on average. Monster Hunter Wilds, high settings, DLSS set to balanced, and initially I went into this at Ultra with DLSS on, had those dips under 60 because with it set up like this, we're only seeing an average of 65 FPS. It's a little unfortunate, and by now I figured we'd have more optimizations for this game. I've been doing a lot of testing with a bunch of different systems, and it's kind of hit or miss. It's all over the place with this one. And the final game I wanted to test here was God of War Ragnarok. I'd say this is the best PlayStation port so far. They did such a good job with this. Ultra settings, 1440p, no DLSS, so we're at a native 1440 with it. Over 120 FPS on average during battle. Once you're just kind of doing some exploring, it does jump up into the 140s, 150s. Overall, not a bad little setup. I do think it looks really good here. And again, yeah, we're using that RTX 4070, which is a little bit on the expensive side right now. So if you don't mind doing 1080, a 4060 or even a 3060 Ti would really work out very well in a system like this. But I'd love to know your thoughts in the comments below. If I was to swap this GPU out for something a bit cheaper, let me know what you think we should use here. I'm thinking about going AMD, installing SteamOS on this thing, and if you're interested in seeing a video like that, make sure you keep an eye on the channel because I'll have one of those coming up soon. But if you're interested in putting something like this together, links for everything I used here, plus some alternatives, are in the description. But that's going to wrap it up for this one. And like always, thanks for watching.